Marcus commands himself to winnow his thoughts. He has a great standard. If someone were to ask you right now, what are you thinking about? Could you give a concise answer? If not, you're daydreaming and wandering too much. It stares you right in the face, Marcus writes. No role is so well suited to philosophy as the one you happen to be in right now. Was he referring specifically to the role of emperor? Did he mean that any and every role is the perfect one for philosophy? I prefer to think it is the latter. I've been lucky enough that some generous fans have sent me rare old copies of Meditations. They're falling apart, worn with age. It strikes me what a Stoic would have thought if given a book that was then a couple 100 years old. They'd think about the person who owned it and what became of them, dead. They'd think about all the things the person did other than study philosophy, mostly pointless stuff. And they'd also think of the difficult times that the wisdom contained within may have helped them, which is what I think now. And then they'd consider how we are all subject to the rhythm of events, and that someone may pick up this book after them and have the same thoughts. Going through one copy of the Hayes translation a few years ago, I found a receipt. It said January 2007, and it was from a Borders in Riverside, California. I'd bought mine on Amazon, so I knew it wasn't mine. Then I realized this was my wife's copy. She'd bought the book shortly after we'd met, on my recommendation. That she'd read it after I mentioned it in passing made me think our feelings might be mutual. It was one of the first things we'd connected over. 10 years later, we are still together. In Gregory Hayes's intro, he says that an American president claims to reread Marcus Aurelius every year. Some research turned up that Bill Clinton was that president. Was that where I got the idea to keep reading and rereading the book? To use it as a reminder of all the lessons that success would bring? Absolute power corrupts absolutely is what we say, but Marcus had absolute power. To me, his writing and his life are proof that the right principles and the right discipline, if followed rigorously, can help buck this timeless trend. Marcus reminded himself, don't await the perfection of Plato's Republic. He wasn't expecting the world to be exactly the way he wanted it to be, but Marcus knew instinctively, as the Catholic philosopher Joseph Pieper would later write, that he alone can do good who knows what things are like and what their situation is. It's funny to think that his writings may be as special as they are because they were never intended for us to be read. Almost every other piece of literature is a kind of performance. It's made for the audience. Meditations isn't. In fact, their original title, Ta eis hauton, roughly translates as to himself. It's also interesting to think that we have no idea if the meditations were once ordered differently. All we have now are translations of translations. No original writing from his hand survives. It all could have been arranged in an entirely different format originally. Did all the books have titles originally, as the first two do? Are those titles made up? Were they all numbered originally? Or were even the breaks between thoughts added in by a later translator? Who hasn't used the expressions, I'll be honest with you, or with all due respect, or I'll be straight with you? It wasn't until I read Marcus's specific condemnation of these phrases that I really thought about what they were saying. Honesty, respect, straightforwardness should be the default. If you have to specifically preface your remarks with it, that's a sign something is wrong with your normal speech and your normal habits. But if you accept the obstacle and work with what you're given, an alternative will present itself. Another piece of what you're trying to assemble, action by action. There's no question that we're going to be stopped from what we'd like to do, or even desperately need to do from time to time. Money will be lost, plans will be frustrated, long-held dreams will be broken. People, including us, will be hurt. And yet, as bad as these situations are, and will be, I think you'll have to admit, they don't prevent everything. You can still practice honesty, forgiveness, friendship, patience, humility, good spirit, resilience, creativity, and on and on. It must have been many reads in before I came to understand that many of the admonishments, don't waste time, don't lose your temper, stop getting caught up in things that don't matter, must be there because Marcus had recently done the exact opposite. Remember, this was essentially his journal, The meditations are reflections written after a long, hard day. They are not abstractions, they are notes on what he can do better next time. There is a line in Joseph Brodsky's essay about the famous equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, which I went to Rome a few years ago to see. If meditations is antiquity, he says, then it is we who are the ruins. What I think he means by that is that when you compare the strength and power and rigorous self-honesty of Marcus's writings to now, all you can feel is a sense of decay. It feels like we have regressed instead of progressed. A great rhetorical exercise from Marcus goes essentially like this. Is a world without shameless people possible? No. So this person you've just met is one of them. Get over it. It's a good thing to remember every time you meet someone who frustrates or bothers you. One of the benefits of reading a book so many times is that it starts to feel like it's following you everywhere. It's like when you get a new car and all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere. It's like you and those drivers are suddenly on the same time. I remember reading East of Eden shortly after Meditations, and guess who is quoted everywhere? Then I read John Stuart Mill, and Marcus appeared again. Then on a trip to New York City, I was walking up 41 St., and there's a plaque with a quote from Marcus. It's one of the most amazing feelings. You find the thread of the work everywhere, and it's like you're both on the same team with the same message to propagate. One of the most practical things I've learned from the Stoics is an exercise I've come to call contemptuous expressions. I love how Marcus would take fancy things and describe them in almost cynical, dismissive language. Roasted meat is a dead animal and vintage wine is old fermented grapes. He even describes the emperor's purple cloak as just a piece of fabric dyed with shellfish blood. The aim was to see these things as they really are, to strip away the legend that encrusts them. I try to use this exercise every day. The short lines are the best. Discard your misperceptions. Stop being jerked like a puppet. Limit yourself to the present. Imagine the Emperor of Rome, with his captive audience and unlimited power, telling himself not to be a person of too many words and too many deeds. How great is that? How inspiring. It wasn't until working with Steve Hanselman on the translations in the Daily Stoic that I was made aware of just how malleable translation was. I assumed that Hayes was capturing the inherent beauty in Marcus. In some sense he was, but he was also choosing to write beautifully. Someone could just as easily decide to be blunt and literal. It gave me a new appreciation for the art of translation, and how much room for interpretation there is in all of it. If there was one translation I would love to read, it would be the late Pierre Hadot's. In his excellent book, The Inner Citadel, about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, Hadot did original translations for the passages he quotes, but sadly he died without publishing a full translation of Marcus for wider consumption. It was in reading Hadot that I first got an explicit explanation of what he calls turning obstacles upside down. I'd obviously read the original passage he quotes several times in Hayes, but Hadot's translation was different. It made it clearer. The original title of my book was Turning Obstacles Upside Down. It was only in reading the Dictionary of Modern Proverbs that I found the Zen saying, "The obstacle is the path," that I was able to combine it all and come up with the book. Everything lasts for a day, the one who remembers and the remembered. That means something special coming from a guy whose face you can still see on Roman coins you can buy on Etsy. From Marcus, I learned who Heraclitus was. Marcus quotes him a lot. "No man steps in the same river twice," is one of the line he quotes. What a beautiful idea. I loved it so much that when I was in college I added a special quote of the week section to the student newspaper, just so I could use it. After I read Marcus, I immediately read Epictetus Liebel's The Art of Living translation, then Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, then back to the Penguin translation of Epictetus, then Seneca's On the Shortness of Life. It's been a 10-year journey now, and I still feel like I'm at the very beginning of it. Or at least there is so much further left to go. How crazy is it that not only does Marcus's journal survive to us, so do the letters between him and his rhetoric teacher, Cornelius Fronto. The Stoics might say that such an event was fated, but I'd say we are incredibly lucky that chance did not destroy these documents and deprive humanity of them. Marcus talks about the logos, essentially the force of the universe. Repeatedly. That word seemed familiar to me when I first read it. Then I made the connection. Viktor Frankl, the psychologist and Holocaust survivor, named his school of psychology logotherapy. Still, I was a bit confused as to what the logos was. Hayes, and many writers, have used the analogy of a dog tied to a cart to explain our connection to the logos. The cart, the logos, is moving, and we are pulled behind it. We have a little slack to move here and there, but not much. I think instinctively at 19 years old I rejected this idea. Predetermination? No free will? Please. That sounded religious. College kids are often attracted to atheism for precisely the freedom and empowerment it implies. But as I have gotten older, I've started to understand how much we are shaped by chance and forces beyond our control. It strikes me then that the debate is not whether we are in fact the dog tied to the moving cart, but rather just how long the rope is. How much room do we have to explore and determine our own pace? A lot? A little? Marcus's meditations are filled with self-criticism. It's important to remember, however, that that's as far as it goes. There was no self-flagellation, no paying penance, no self-esteem issues from guilt or self-loathing. This self-criticism is constructive. There is a passage in Marcus where he talks about sitting next to a smelly, rude person. It must have been just a couple months after I first read that I was on a flight from Long Beach to New York. I was stuck in the middle seat. The person next to me was horrible. They were imposing in my space, they were being obnoxious, I was stewing. Then this hit me. Either I say something or I let it go. All the anger left me. I went back to what I was doing. I probably think of that line every other time I get on a plane now. As a reminder of the man and the principles in the book, I ended up buying a marble bust of Marcus carved in 1840 that sits on my desk, where I can see it daily. It's probably the most expensive piece of art I own. It cost $900. But for the reminders it's given me and the calming presence it has had, it's worth every penny. To think that 3 or 4 generations of people may have owned this thing, that someone will own it after I die. Years later, one of my readers created and sent me 2 3D printed busts of both Marcus and Seneca, which sit in my library. They're a lot cheaper, and they weigh a lot less, but they have the same impact. I set out to learn everything I could about Marcus Aurelius. At one point, I found an old academic paper that suggested Marcus's writing was shaped by an addiction to opium. Why else would have written down extended cerebral reflections about spinning away from the earth and looking at things from far above? The answer is because this is a stoic exercise that goes back thousands of years, and in fact, has also been observed by astronauts thousands of years later. All the things that people do hallucinogens to explore, you can also do while sober as a judge. It just takes work. Explicitly setting standards for himself in Book 10, Marcus extols himself to be upright, modest, straightforward, sane, cooperative, disinterested. In a blog post in 2007, I added the following for myself: empathetic, open, diligent, ambitious. I wrote a piece about Peter Thiel's long campaign for revenge against Gawker earlier this year. As I was writing it, a line from Marcus came rushing back from the recesses of my memory. The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like that. In writing The Daily Stoic, I got to parse the words of Marcus Aurelius and his translators in ways I otherwise never would have done. I've always liked the line, "How trivial the things we want so passionately are." In my initial readings, I'd always thought it was beautiful the way he was saying passionately are. Upon later reflection, I realized Hayes Aurelius were saying, the things our want so passionately are, which has its own beauty. You also come to realize and understand the deeper historical references. For instance, in one passage Marcus writes, "To escape imperialization, that indelible stain." I know obviously what imperialism and imperial mean, but it wasn't until many reads later that I came to understand he meant to escape the trappings of his office. He was saying, I must avoid being changed and corrupted by my office. Not all of us hold executive power, but we all can use that advice. When translating for the Daily Stoic, our editor asked about a line where Marcus says, Enough of this whiny, miserable life. Stop monkeying around. Would Marcus have ever seen a monkey? She asked. Or is this a modern line? Of course he would have. In fact, his psychopathic son probably killed a bunch of them in the Colosseum. Marcus supposedly hated the gladiatorial games, but he definitely would have been familiar with a shocking amount of African wildlife. When I interviewed Robert Greene for the Daily Stoic's companion website, I was surprised to hear he also loved the passage about seeing roasted meat and other dishes in front of you and suddenly realizing, this is a dead fish, a dead bird, a dead pig. As he explained to me, I've tried to bring that across in my writing, for instance, to deconstruct things like power and seduction and to see the actual elements in play instead of the legends surrounding them. During our interview, he actually showed me his own copy of the Meditations and could remember the camping trip when he had written all the notes on the pages. On several of them, he had marked AF in the marginalia, a shorthand for amor fati, a love of one's fate. As he explained the idea, stop wishing for something else to happen, for a different fate. That is to live a false life. The best way to learn and to lead is by example. I think that's why I liked Marcus's book so much. He was showing me, us, what is possible. As he put it, nothing is as encouraging as when virtues are visibly embodied in the people around us, when we're practically showered with them. In my own education, I've always followed Marcus's dictum to go straight to the seat of intelligence, your own, the world's, your neighbor's. He also writes that learning to read and write requires a master, and so does the art of life. To me, people like Robert Greene were that master, and so were people like Marcus. You have to go straight to the sources of knowledge and absorb what you can from them. During one of his most dangerous and threatening adventures, the journey down the river of doubt, Teddy Roosevelt carried with him a copy of Meditations. I would kill to flip through his copy. Did he sit down at night and read few pages? Are there interesting notes in the margins? What were his favorite passages? A more stoic question, how many other famous or important men and women have sat down with a copy of Marcus? And where are they now? Gone and mostly forgotten. In my work with best-selling authors and creatives, there is one line from Marcus that I am often tempted to quote. Ambition, he reminded himself, means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Doing good work is what matters. Recognition and rewards, those are just extra. To be too attached to results you don't control? That's a recipe for misery. Despite his privileges, Marcus Aurelius had a difficult life. The Roman historian Cassius Dio mused that Marcus did not meet with the good fortune that he deserved, for he was not strong in body and was involved in a multitude of troubles throughout practically his entire reign. But throughout these struggles, he never gave up. It's an inspiring example for us to think about today if we get tired, frustrated, or have to deal with some crisis.